We welcome this opportunity to be able to brief the media and indeed the nation, especially our members, about the decisions that were taken by the National Executive Committee of the African National Congress, which held its virtual special meeting from the 28th to the 30th of August to take forward specific matters that included issues such as the COVID-19 pandemic, the fight against corruption, the progress that is being made on the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Program, the scourge of gender-based violence and femicide, and local government as well as our country's African agenda. The NEC received an update on the state of the coronavirus pandemic in our country and the measures that have been taken by government and many other sectors of society to reduce the spread of COVID-19 and limit its impact on people's health, lives, and livelihoods. The NEC was encouraged by the significant decline in new coronavirus cases across all provinces, as well as the decline in hospital admissions and deaths. These figures suggest that the country has most likely passed the peak of infections earlier than projected, with fewer infections and fatalities. This is due in large part to the decisive action taken in March to curb transmission of the virus and by the adherence of all South Africans to the measures that were necessary to prevent infection. The NEC mourned the lives of those who passed away as a result of COVID-19 and extends its condolences and sympathies to the families and friends of those who have passed away. The NEC paid tribute to the doctors, the nurses, health and other frontline workers whose tireless and selfless efforts have helped to save lives and restore many patients back to life or to health. The nation owes a debt of gratitude for working under difficult conditions, at risk to their own health, to ensure that we overcome this health emergency. The NEC agreed that the safety and health of all frontline personnel must be a priority and welcome the engagements that have taken place between the Department of Health and trade unions to ensure that there is adequate supply of personal protective equipment for all frontline workers. The meeting also welcomed the decision of government to move the country to Alert Level 2 from the 18th of August 2020 and agreed that this was justified both by the decline in infections and by the need to resume most economic activities in our country as speedily and as safely as possible. However, the NEC agreed that, as is happening in many parts of the world, there remains a substantial risk of a second wave of infections as restrictions on movement and economic activity are relaxed. It is therefore vital that all South Africans remain cautious and vigilant and continue to adhere to the most basic prevention measures: wearing masks, physical distancing, as well as regular hand washing and sanitizing. Through consistent adherence by all South Africans to these and other measures announced by the health authorities, our country will be able to avoid the economic and social disruption of a return to more restrictive regulations. The ANC will continue to intensify its campaign of awareness and mobilization among communities to prevent the spread of the virus and ensure adequate care for those who fall ill. It will also campaign for widespread take-up of the National Contact Tracing app, it's called COVID Alert SA, which will soon be launched to inform people privately and unanimously if they have been exposed to a person who has tested positive to coronavirus. The NEC notes progress on the measures put in place to deal decisively with corruption related to COVID-19, including to recoup illegally acquired funds. Law enforcement agencies must leave no stone unturned in dealing with this matter. Repeat, law enforcement agencies must leave no stone unturned as they deal with this matter. Government must explore all avenues to speed up investigations and prosecutions of those and other related corruption cases. The NEC welcomed the decision by government to make public details of COVID-related contracts awarded by all departments and public entities. This is an important step towards greater transparency and accountability in government procurement. In fact, it is seen as being quite historic. The NEC commends all South Africans for their united action over the last 5 months to keep themselves and others safe. This spirit and dedication will be required in the many months that lie ahead as South Africa and the world comes to terms with this new normal. The NEC welcomed the progress that is being made among social partners under the auspices of NEDLAC to develop an economic reconstruction and recovery program. It was encouraged by the extent of agreement amongst all the partners, business, labor, community, as well as government, on the key interventions that are required and for the need to act with urgency. The NEC reaffirmed its position that given the depth of the economic damage caused by COVID-19 and the difficulties that our economy was already experiencing before the onset of the pandemic, extraordinary measures are required to protect existing jobs and to create new ones in the immediate to medium term. These include the implementation of a massive infrastructure investment program, the stimulation of local production and manufacturing, a public employment drive, and the implementation of key economic reforms. The ANC has released its economic recovery program, which combines efforts towards reconstruction with accelerated transformation, economic inclusion, particularly for Black people, young and also the youth rather, and also women, as well as to engender ways for faster economic growth in our country. The ANC government announced relief measures of an amount of 500 billion rand to deal with the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. This was to deal with the health effects, measures to prevent a massive humanitarian crisis, and to provide a safety net for households, for businesses, to cushion them against the impact of the restrictions that were imposed. The 500 billion rand is being financed through a combination of revenue foregone by the government. This resulted in tax relief. It also is made up of credit guarantees, additional government borrowing, and reprioritization of existing government budgets. The ANC recognizes that while these measures have had a positive impact and continue to do so, they are insufficient to deal with the totality of the challenges that our people are experiencing right now. Challenges of unemployment, poverty, inequality, and most of all, exclusion from the economic activity which our society faces. It is in this context that the work on reconstruction, growth, and transformation should be completed as urgently as possible. The NEC will shortly convene a special Lekgotla on the Economic Reconstruction and Recovery Program. The NEC reaffirmed the position taken at its meeting of 31st July to 2nd August in 2020 that the ANC needs to draw a line in the sand between the organization and those who steal from the people. The NEC agreed on decisive action that needs to be taken to tackle corruption within our own ranks as the ANC and across society. In this regard, the meeting received a report from the National Working Committee on the work undertaken to collate information on the individuals within the ANC who are facing charges of corruption or other serious crimes. The NEC welcomed the report and actions being taken at various levels and resolved that these actions must be completed as a matter of urgency. This must be accompanied by public accountability. The NEC agreed that this will be a turning point in the fight against corruption and accordingly decided on the following. The NEC endorsed the contents of President Ramaphosa's letter to ANC members of 23rd August as a clear articulation of the policies and positions of the organization and agreed to the implementation of the points of action contained therein. The NEC emphasized that what seems to be a choreographed campaign against the president will not distract the movement from undertaking an intensified program against corruption and state capture as mandated by the 54th National Conference. In this regard, we will also work with other sectors of society and the broader population to confront the scourge of corruption. It also decided that cadres of the movement who are formally charged for corruption or other serious crimes must immediately step aside from all leadership positions in the ANC, in legislatures or other government structures, pending the finalization of their cases. The officials, as mandated, will develop guidelines and procedures on implementation, and the next NWC meeting will receive a progress report in this regard in terms of how this decision is being implemented. In cases where this has not happened, such individuals will be instructed to step aside. The other decision was that cadres of the ANC who are reported to be involved in corrupt and other serious criminal practices must go to the Integrity Commission to explain themselves. Those who do not give an acceptable explanation may be suspended. NEC also decided that cadres of the ANC who are convicted of corruption or other serious crimes must resign from leadership positions and face disciplinary action in line with the ANC constitution. Other decision was that the NEC will meet with the Integrity Commission with a view to strengthen its role in restoring the values of the ANC and ensuring that it has the means and the resources it needs to carry out its mandate. Other decision was that guidelines on the ANC's approach to internal leadership contests in elective meetings and conferences of the organization will be developed, especially rules for lobbying and campaigning. This will take into account the organization's experiences over many years and will be guided by the overriding imperative to ensure that internal democratic processes do protect the movement's integrity and do indeed produce the best cadres to lead transformation. The other decision was the ANC will put in place a mechanism for leaders to make regular declarations of financial interest to the organization, drawing on existing practices in parliament and government. The system and process will need to ensure a proper balance between privacy and accountability. Other decision was that guidelines will be developed on ANC leaders and their families doing business with government and public entities. These guidelines will give due regard to the right of every person, like every citizen in our country, to engage in legitimate business activity as allowed by our Constitution, while removing the potential for any ANC leaders or members of their families to derive undue benefit from political access. Proceeding from the understanding that this is a matter affecting all parties and government institutions, the ANC will also table this matter for discussion in the legislatures and encourage forums such as NEDLEC to engage on this issue. The NEC is determined that these measures should be implemented consistently and without any fear or favor or prejudice, and that they are essential steps towards renewing, rebuilding, and uniting our movement. The NEC also discussed matters that have to do with local government. The NEC received reports on local government. It also listened to proposals on electoral reform, on the process of selection of ANC local representatives, of public representatives, and on preparations for the 2021 local government elections. Now, this discussion is still ongoing because the NEC will continue discussions on these matters at a special session later in the week. NEC also discussed organizational campaigns and programs that are the lifeblood of the African National Congress. The NEC took note of the organizational campaign against racism and vowed to intensify the promotion of the principle of non-racialism in our country and to continue to fight racism and tribalism in the movement and in society. This is particularly important as we celebrate Heritage Month in September 2020, recognizing the centenaries of anniversaries of Harry Gwala, Rusty Bernstein, Vuyisi Lemini, Phyllis Ntantala, Robert Gesha, and a number of other stalwarts of our movement who have moved on. The NEC condemned in the strongest terms the killing of disabled teenager Nathaniel Julius from El Dorado Park. As a society, we are responsible for the well-being and protection of children and persons living with disabilities. The NEC also reflected on the ongoing program against gender-based violence and femicide and urged Parliament to move swiftly in considering and finalizing the legislative amendments that have been tabled before it to strengthen measures against gender-based violence and femicide. It welcomed the broadening of engagements by men and boys on the role they can play in the fight against gender-based violence and femicide, and added their voices to the call that women's lives matter. As we conclude Women's Month, we must ensure that in dealing with gender-based violence and femicide as the worst manifestations of patriarchy, we also tackle other dimensions of patriarchy, including the economic exclusion of women in the economy of their own country. When it comes to the African agenda, the NEC notes that South Africa continues to play a critical role in its capacity as African Union Chair, as led by President Ramaphosa. It welcomed the reports on work done around a continent-wide program on COVID-19, working with the AU Commission, regional economic communities around the various regions on our continent, and the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. The NEC further acknowledged the impact of COVID-19 on the implementation of the African Continental Free Trade Area and appreciated the resumption of work to take the process of a common African market forward. It welcomed the fact that the Office of the Africa Free Trade Area has now been opened in Ghana, headed by one of our own as Director General. It also notes work being done to continue to silence the guns in Mali and Libya and ensure stability in Mozambique, Sudan, and Zimbabwe. The NEC welcomed government efforts to engage the situation in Zimbabwe, in particular, the deployment of special envoys. It emphasized the importance of the envoys engaging with all stakeholders in the country to assist in addressing the current situation. ANC and government processes must complement each other. The NEC supported greater party-to-party interaction between the ANC and ZANU-PF with the intention to develop a fuller understanding of the situation in Zimbabwe and to determine how the ANC and government can play a supportive role. It was also agreed that the ANC must speak to all parties and all stakeholders as well. Concern in the discussions was expressed at the insurgency in Mozambique. Government was urged to effectively address any security threats to this country and to provide support to the government of Mozambique should this be requested. But also importantly, that we should continue to act within the parameters and framework that have been set out by SADC. The NEC agreed that the International Relations Committee of the ANC must provide detailed reports on these two matters at its next meeting. The NEC supports the ongoing alliance campaign of solidarity with the people of Palestine in this very difficult and trying time that they are going through. This special NEC of the ANC has made significant progress in addressing critical issues of organizational unity and renewal. It has emerged from this weekend's meeting with a clear direction and unity of purpose. This was one of the better meetings that the National Executive Committee has held. The discussions that ensued in this meeting have laid a firm foundation for the organization to provide leadership on the urgent reconstruction and transformation of our economy, to sustain our response on the coronavirus pandemic, but more importantly, that the African National Congress must fight corruption, and that what the NEC decided at the earlier meeting, that it is drawing a line in the sand about fighting corruption, must be implemented. But the NEC was also equally determined that we must engage as a movement and as a membership of the ANC and as society. We must engage in the fight to end violence against women and children, and to end the femicide and the killing of the women and the daughters of our country. The ANC held a really fantastic meeting, and it is these decisions that we are willing to provide to the nation. Thank you very much.